Greetings, everyone here at La Casa Inn. Thank you for coming to this, and I hope that we learn together. So, the prevalence of psychosis among DV survivors, a culture and mental health assessment. Introduction. Cultural groups have three main things: a set of core beliefs, patterns of behavior, and common values. As a survivor who now works in the domestic violence DV sector of social change here with you at La Casa Inc., I know personally that intimate partner violence survivors are unique and share similarities. It is not only the abuse endured that we share, but also the ways we function afterward, as well as the ways our minds have been altered by the trauma. So again, we share a set of core beliefs, patterns of behavior, and common values, while maintaining quote unquote intergroup variation with enormous diversity. My search of study of this cultural group's presentation and prevalence of a psychological and physiological response, psychosis, to trauma is limited to three studies in the US and three studies in the UK. Disparities in prevalence. Study one, a study based in the US, had geography, citizenship status, gender identity, and sexual orientation disparities. Study two, a study based in the UK, had geography, ethnicity, race, gender identity, and sexual orientation disparities. Study three, based in the UK, had gender identity, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, and sexual orientation disparities. Study four, a study based in the US, had geography, socioeconomic status, gender identity, and sexual orientation disparities. Study five, a study based in the UK, had ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, and geography disparities. And finally, study six, US based, had ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability status disparities. None of these studies describe the above-mentioned attributes, and without this data, there is little to no understanding of how these situations involving domestic violence and emotional disabilities differ across biographical items. What these studies did mention. The first study mentioned that there's a quote-unquote general lack of research on adult trauma exposure, including intimate partner violence, IPV, as a risk factor for psychotic experiences. The second study stated that psychiatric disorders can increase vulnerability to domestic violence, and that domestic violence is associated with both the risk and chronicity mental disorder. Study 4 stated psychosis lies on a continuum with quote unquote normal human experiences and can be trauma induced. Study 5 stated that those who experienced IPV were quote unquote at least 5 times more likely to experience a psychotic phenomenon. And study 6 stated that there was a quote unquote higher risk of experiencing adult lifetime partner violence among women with all diagnostic categories, including psychosis. analysis regarding disparities. So it's possible that the data was missing from those particular studies because perhaps researchers sought not to differentiate between people. Researchers thought naming differences could make space for biases to surface. There was a possible lack of diverse participants. The studies had little to no diversity because of the stigmas associated with both DV and mental illnesses, and thus many just did not join. Or the location of participants made it impossible for certain communities to participate. Implications for social work practice, personal bias, and next steps. In the realm of social work, such studies matter a great deal. In domestic violence shelters across the United States, knowing that DV, or domestic violence, could bring about psychotic symptoms could help staff be better equipped with providing necessary support and perhaps treatment. Our agency has already brought in a psychotherapist to help survivors, but we could better be trained in methods to help survivors who have emergent psychoses due to IPV. Therefore, such studies are imperative to conduct, excuse me. For social workers to adhere to our code of ethics, we must challenge the absence of communities in these studies to bring about a fuller picture of how DV impacts survivors. If intimate partner violence creates or just worsens psychosis, we need to know that so that we can be at the forefront to demonstrate the dignity and worth of this cultural group. Soliciting researchers to study the link between trauma and psychosis will help to establish our integrity and competence, as well as service all those while challenging social injustice, because without this valuable information, survivors will continue to suffer. I would like to point out my biases because I am biased. I believe that emotional disabilities and all disabilities are on a continuum of quote unquote normal human experience and have felt this way for over 20 years. This is not because I myself am disabled. I felt that way before particular disabilities manifested. I simply feel that every person should be treated as human beings with empathy and compassion in order to make our work trauma informed. I implore you to reach out and begin this process. Our next steps could be to partner with other DV agencies as well as the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence to put out the call far and wide for researchers to study this phenomenon. We could then contact our local universities in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and the Southwest itself to find researchers. We can train our therapy interns and crisis advocates to screen for psychoses and provide them with basic grounding techniques in case such screening is triggering for those who call our 24/7 hotline. These are actions that could be taken within the next year so that we allow ourselves the required time to best prepare for the changes to come. Making our shelter agency more equipped to assist survivors is possible, and I hope you can see that this is so that we can get started. Let's do this.